A storm had swallowed the sky, the kind that doesn't knock politely but crashes in. Wild, loud, unruly. Thunder shook the windows, trees bent like kneeling saints. Somewhere in the countryside where the road curved through empty fields, a boy sat by a window and waited. His name was Eli. He was small, with a frame too thin for the coat he wore, and eyes that had already learned silence. His mother slept restlessly on the couch, one hand curled toward the door as if reaching in dreams. Eli didn't speak. He didn't cry. He just lit a single candle. It flickered as if uncertain it had permission to stay, but Eli cupped his hands around it, as if protecting something sacred, as if that fragile light could hold back the night. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Please bring him home." Nothing answered, no lightning bolt, no voice in the wind, just the rain, just the flame. But elsewhere, on a long stretch of road, slick with rain and emptiness, a man sat behind the wheel of a pickup. His face was hollowed by worry. His hands clenched the steering wheel too tightly. He hadn't planned to come back. Not tonight, maybe not ever. But suddenly, without a word, without a thought, he slowed. His hands turned the wheel. No drama, no revelation, just a quiet pivot, and the truck turned home. Miles away, Eli opened his eyes. The candle hadn't gone out. It burned steady now, warm against the dark. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. He had already known that something had changed. We wait for miracles like we wait for thunder, loud, dramatic, unmistakable. But the truth is softer, so much softer. Miracles don't roar, they whisper. And the first miracle is always this: a change in the mind, not the world. The candle didn't stop the storm. The boy didn't command his father's return. But in the moment he chose hope, in the moment he believed something beyond his fear, he shifted. And in that shift, the veil began to lift. There is no order of difficulty in miracles. A candle in a storm is no smaller than parting the seas. A turning heart is as vast as healing the body. The mind aligned with love performs no calculations. It doesn't weigh outcomes. It simply sees rightly, and in that sight, everything changes. The Course doesn't ask us to perform miracles, but to allow them, and to recognize when they come, not in grandeur, but in stillness, not in control, but in surrender. The Father did not know why he turned around, but the light did, and that is enough. Let this be your first remembering. No miracle is greater than another, only your willingness to see it, and that willingness is the light you carry. The healer's name was Leor. They came from far away to see him, carrying pain like old coins, worn smooth from years of handling. Leor placed his hands over their hearts, their joints, their weary foreheads, and something always shifted. A breath would deepen, a weight would lift. Sometimes a tear, sometimes a laugh. The people called it a miracle. Leor smiled humbly at first, but over time, something changed. He began to feel it in his fingers, that tingling rush, that hum. He began to think of them as his hands, his gift, his ability. He no longer paused before placing them on others. He no longer prayed. Until one day, a woman came. She had the quietest eyes. She didn't tell her story. She didn't need to. Leor raised his hands, waited, but nothing came. No hum, no warmth, no shift. He tried again. Nothing. He excused himself, left the room, and stood alone beneath the trees behind the clinic. And for the first time in years, he knelt. Not to summon, not to perform, but to remember. His palms pressed against the soil, shaking, not with power, but with grief. He whispered into the silence, "I thought it was me." The wind didn't answer, but something inside did. a stillness so vast it felt holy. And he saw it, not with his eyes but with his whole being. It was never the hands. It was never the gesture. It was never him. It was the source. The healing was never given by him. It moved through him. He was a window. The light passed in because he had once been clear, but in claiming the light, he had turned into a mirror, reflecting only himself. And mirrors cannot heal. That night, Lior returned. The woman was still waiting. He said nothing. He sat across from her, breathed, and did not reach. He simply opened, and the room filled with warmth again. Not because he acted, but because he surrendered. We want miracles to be ours. We want the credit, the glory, the magic. But that is the voice of the ego. The Course reminds us, miracles do not matter. Only the source does. T-1.1.3:3. Miracles are not power plays. They are power surrenders. They arise not from force, but from humility. They are invitations, not commands. The hand that heals is not yours. It belongs to the silence that moves through all things. When you stop trying to be the light, you remember that you already are the opening through which it shines. There is no need to take credit. There is only the need to be still, still enough to remember that the miracle was never yours, and yet it will always flow through you because you never left its source. She once sang in cathedrals, not for fame, not for money, but for something older, something holy. Her name was Selene, and when she sang, time unraveled. Strangers wept. Even the air seemed to soften around her. Her voice carried memory, not just of music, but of home. And then, one morning, it was gone. She opened her mouth, ready for rehearsal, and nothing came. No note, not even a whisper. Doctors ran tests. Therapists offered breath exercises and silence rituals. Nothing worked. The verdict was ambiguous. Psychogenic, they said. Emotional stress. But Selene knew it wasn't stress, it was loss. She had lost the song, not the voice. Weeks passed. She tried to force it, tried humming in secret, mimicking old scales in the mirror. But her throat remained closed, like a door without a handle. So she stopped. She stopped trying to reclaim it, stopped waiting for the sound, and instead, she listened. She walked each morning into the woods, sat beneath an old cedar, watched birds speak in rhythms she couldn't decode, felt the breeze slip around her like an unseen hand. It was during one of these mornings that something strange happened. She heard a melody, not with her ears, but from within. It didn't have words. It didn't ask for performance. It simply rose in her chest, like a tide, gentle, relentless. For the first time in months, she smiled, not because she could sing again, but because she didn't need to. The silence was not absence, it was presence. That evening, back in her room, she lit a candle, not as an offering, not as a request, just to mark the space. And she hummed, softly. The sound returned, not because she reached for it, but because she made space for it. Miracles are like this. They are not rewards, not rare exceptions, not anomalies of divine pity. They are natural. They are what remains when fear falls away. The Course tells us miracles are natural. When they do not occur, something has gone wrong. T-1.1.6-1. The wrong is not punishment, it is forgetfulness. We have forgotten how to trust, forgotten how to receive, forgotten the sound of our own soul singing through stillness. Selene's voice had never left her. It had simply gone quiet, waiting for her to stop performing and start listening. You are not broken when miracles feel far away. You are simply noisy inside. Beneath the noise, the light waits, Miracles are the music of the soul remembering itself. When they seem absent, it is only because we have closed the door. But the door is not locked. It never was. The miracle waits, as patient as breath. Dust curled through the air like incense. The buildings had collapsed into themselves. Smoke lingered without source. Somewhere a bell rang, a sound so out of place it almost made the silence weep. The soldier stood alone in the rubble. He had been trained to see only threats, only lines, only orders. But that morning something cracked. Maybe it was the child. She couldn't have been more than 6, hair matted with ash, eyes too wide for her face. She stood in the middle of the road, one shoe missing, a stuffed bear clutched in both hands. No sound, no plea, just presence. The soldier saw her not as a risk or a complication or a symbol of something to be managed, but as a human, a small one, a trembling one. His fingers tightened around the rifle. His orders were clear. Move forward, no stops, no interference. But his heart, it did something different. He lowered the gun, not slowly, not dramatically, just with finality. He slung it over his back, stepped across the cracked stone, and reached for her. She didn't move. Until he offered his hand. Then, without a word, she placed her small palm into his calloused one. Together they walked, across broken earth, through a street that still trembled with memory, past tanks and fear and flags. He helped her to the other side, and then he sat down. Not because the mission was over, but because he was. Something in him had laid itself down. Not a belief, not a politics, not a nation, but the war inside. That war had ended. The Course tells us miracles are expressions of love. T-1.1.3:1. Love is not weak. It is not passive. It is not decorative. It is power made pure. To lay down a sword when the world demands you wield it, that is a miracle. To touch a child's hand instead of a trigger, that is a miracle. To choose compassion when fear snarls louder, that is a miracle. The soldier didn't end the war, but he ended something far more important, the idea that fear was all there is. He returned to the others that night, quieter, lighter. They asked no questions. Somehow they already knew. Miracles do not always change the world. Sometimes they just change the one who walks through it, and that is enough. Because every time you choose love over defense, you remember who you really are, and in that remembering, you become a place where others can remember too. The miracle is never far. It is always one choice away, one moment of love, offered, received, reflected. The monk had done it every night for 43 years, at the same hour, with the same robe, with the same slow steps. He lit the lanterns along the temple path. One by one, a small flame passed from his candle to the wicks until the dark stone corridor glowed golden and soft. He never rushed. He never missed a night. He never questioned the act. To him, it wasn't service, it wasn't even ritual, and it was breath. He had begun as a novice, assigned the task by the head abbot. And when the seasons changed, when wars passed, when names came and went, he kept lighting them, without asking why. But something had changed in the village. Children had begun to gather at the temple wall, peeking over the stones. At first, just 1 or 2, then more. They didn't speak, didn't interrupt, just watched. Watched as the monk moved down the path. Watched the way his hands never trembled. Watched the way the light followed him like a faithful animal. And after a while, others joined. A tired mother standing silently beside her daughter, an old man who hadn't left his home in months, a merchant who'd lost everything but felt drawn by something he didn't understand. None of them came for answers. They came for the light, and the monk never noticed he didn't need to, because he wasn't trying to give them anything. He was simply being what he had become, a bearer of light, not by intention, but by practice, by habit. The Course teaches miracles are habits and should be involuntary. T-1.1.5 to 1. When love becomes your rhythm, miracles happen without your awareness. They pass through you like breath through flute holes. They happen in your silence, in your presence, in the things you do when no one is watching. We try so hard to create miracles, to manufacture them, to perform them like magic tricks for the wounded places of the world. But the real miracle, it's not in the doing, it's in the allowing. When peace becomes your practice, miracles become your echo. You don't light the path for others by trying to. You light it by walking it, one lantern at a time. And one day you may look behind you and see a gathering, not of admirers, but of those who felt the warmth of your quiet habit and remembered the light in themselves. Miracles are not dramatic. They are devoted. When love becomes your pattern, miracles become your presence, and you may never know how many hearts you've illuminated simply by showing up. The flute was found buried beneath the roots of a tree. She wasn't looking for it. She had only wandered off the trail, barefoot and distracted, following the quiet rhythm of a breeze. Her name was Kaya, and she had been silent for a long time. The flute was old, smooth, etched with symbols no one had spoken in centuries. She touched it like it was sleeping. She brought it to her lips. Nothing. No sound, not a breath of music. She tried again. Again, the notes refused her. Her hands tightened, her jaw clenched. Somewhere inside, something hardened. The silence was not peaceful. It was punishment. She carried the flute home, sat with it every day. She practiced positions, controlled her breathing, imitated old techniques she found in forgotten books. Still nothing. Until one morning, it cracked. Not the flute. Her. She was holding it, sitting by the window, the dawn just brushing the floorboards with gold, when the memory rose. Not loud, just true. Her mother calling her selfish, her teacher, telling her she didn't have the gift. The boy who laughed when she tried to sing. And then, the moment she decided never to make a sound again. It came back. Clear and sharp. Kaya didn't try to fight it. She cried, softly, then uncontrollably. Not the kind of tears meant for show. The kind that rise from the parts of you that have been locked away too long. The flute lay still in her lap. She wept until she forgot who she was crying for, and when the tears were done, she didn't wipe them. She lifted the flute again, and this time, music, low, haunting, true. It wasn't beautiful in the polished sense. It was raw. It trembled in the air like a secret set free. She played without trying. It wasn't her skill. It was her surrender. The Course reminds us, miracles are everyone's right, but purification is necessary first. T-1.1.7:1. The right is given. The music is already yours. But you cannot force it through a blocked channel. Judgment clogs the soul. Fear compresses it. Control strangles it. To receive a miracle, you must become quiet enough to hear it, and clean enough to let it pass through. Purification is not about being good. It is about being real. To admit the pain, to grieve the lie, to unclench. And when you do, the miracle arrives. Not because you earned it, but because you finally made room. Kaya did not unlock the flute. She unlocked herself, and the music had been waiting all along. So has your light and your voice and your healing. Let the tears come if they must. Let the silence soften, because on the other side of your willingness to feel is the sound of your miracle. He stood outside the train station with a worn coat and a paper cup full of silence. No sign, no words, just presence. 1,000 faces passed him by that day, eyes fixed on their futures, but one man, older, slower, almost invisible to the world, stopped. He had only one coin. Not a gesture of abundance, not extra, just enough for a single loaf or bus fare. And yet something moved in him, a quiet nudge, not from logic, but from a place deeper. He dropped the coin in the cup and nodded. The man on the ground said nothing, only raised his eyes for a moment, and in them, not thanks, but recognition. The giver walked away. He had no idea why he did it. He wasn't kind by nature. He wasn't religious or trying to make amends. But something felt different. That night he sat in his kitchen, alone with his chipped cup and his humming radiator. He remembered the eyes of the man on the corner, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he laughed. It burst out of him, rough, unfamiliar, full of life. Not at anything, but from something, from a place that had been locked for years. He didn't laugh at joy. He laughed at the absurdity of how long he'd kept himself apart. That one coin didn't make him poor. It made him open. The Course tells us miracles are a kind of exchange. They bring more love both to the giver and the receiver. T-1.1.8 to 1-2. But it's not an exchange the world understands. In the world, you give to lose, but in the light, you give to remember that what you give, you are, and what you withhold, you deny in yourself. The miracle was not the coin. The miracle was the bridge it built between one soul forgotten by the world and another who had forgotten himself. Miracles remind us that we are not separate, that giving and receiving are the same motion of love. Like breath in and breath out, like laughter and the tears that sometimes follow, you are not asked to save the world, only to see it, to see the face of another not as needful but as equal, and to give not from duty but from presence. The man gave a coin, but what he received was a return to himself, to his own softness, to the truth that even the smallest gesture can crack the shell of isolation and let the light pour in. The woman had been found near the shoreline, confused, barefoot, her hair tangled like seaweed. No ID, no name, only questions. They brought her to a small care home at the edge of the city, quiet, sheltered, a place where names often get lost. She didn't speak much, not because she couldn't, but because language felt foreign, disconnected. She watched the world as if through water, distant, warped. They called her Mara. It wasn't her name, but it filled the gap. Labels always do. Weeks passed. She helped in the garden, watered the herbs, sometimes sang softly without knowing the words. The nurses said she was gentle, cooperative, but inside, she was drifting, not lost in time, but in identity, like someone had torn her pages out and left only the spine of her book. One morning, the center held a visit for children from a nearby school. They brought drawings, cookies, too much noise. Mara stood in the corner, unsure how to move among them, until a boy, no more than 7, ran toward her with wild abandon. He grabbed her skirt, beamed up, and wrapped his arms around her waist. She froze. His small hands, his beating heart, pressed into her ribs, and something cracked. Not loudly, not with drama, but like ice giving way to spring. Her hands trembled as they found his back. She returned the hug, and then it came. Not a word, a knowing. She didn't remember everything. Not her address, not her childhood, not her favorite song, but she remembered her name. Elena. She whispered it before she even knew she'd spoken. The child looked up, smiling as if he had known it all along. That evening, Elena sat under a willow tree by the garden path. She watched the light filter through the leaves and felt whole. Not because her memory had returned in full, but because something deeper had. The Course tells us, miracles restore the mind to its fullness. T-1.1.9 to 1. Fullness is not about data. It's not about the collection of facts or achievements. It's about the return to the part of you that was never lost, only hidden. The ego would have you believe you are broken, fragmented, scarred. But the miracle knows better. It doesn't add, it reveals. Elena didn't need her history to be whole. She needed presence. A moment of love, unguarded, unearned. And in that moment, the soul remembered its shape. You too have forgotten. Not your name, perhaps, but your light. The miracle does not fix you. It shows you that you were never in pieces, only sleeping, and now you are waking. The room was quiet, except for the beeping of the monitor and the soft rustle of curtains moving with the wind. Rosa lay still, her breath thin as thread. Her hands, spotted with time, rested lightly on the blanket. The world had grown narrow, a single room, a single bed, the last edge of life. Her sister stood at the doorway. Marina hadn't seen Rosa in 22 years. Not since the argument, not since the wedding that Rosa didn't attend. The calls that were never returned, the letters that were never sent. Too much time, they both had thought, too many wounds. But now, there was only now. Marina stepped forward. Rosa turned her head slowly, her eyes dull but alert. There were no rehearsed words, no speeches, just silence between them. And then Marina did something unexpected. She knelt beside the bed, took Rosa's hand, and said, not with bitterness or apology, but with breath, "I missed you." That was all. Rosa blinked, and for a moment, they both remembered. Not the fights, not the years of distance, but the days when they were girls, running through the vineyard barefoot, laughing in the sun, making up songs only they understood. Rosa whispered, "I missed you too." And the past, so heavy, so sharp, so tightly held, dissolved. Not forgotten, but released. As easily as smoke rising from the last ember of a fire. In that moment, they weren't old women with regrets. They were sisters. The Course tells us miracles undo the past in the present. T-1.1.2 6:1. This undoing isn't about changing history. It's about recognizing that the past is not here unless we drag it forward with our thoughts. The miracle doesn't travel back in time. It calls you home to the only moment that ever mattered. Now, because the past cannot hurt you if you don't hold on to it. And the future cannot heal you if you're not willing to be here. Now, the miracle occurs when you stop telling the story and let love rewrite the ending. Marina didn't need Rosa to apologize. Rosa didn't need Marina to explain. All they needed was the courage to return to this room, to this breath, to this chance. Forgiveness doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives like this. Quiet, tired, honest. A surrender, not a solution. The years did not vanish because they were erased. They vanished because they no longer mattered. There was only the hand being held and the truth in the heart. That love, once chosen, makes all else irrelevant. You carry your past like a bag of stones. But the miracle is simple. You can set it down any time, even now. He believed it from the time he was 9. The curse. It started with the accident. His fault, they said. A candle tipped, a fire spread. His brother's leg never quite healed. No one meant to say it out loud, but silence can speak louder than words. After that, misfortune followed him like a shadow. Jobs fell through, relationships crumbled. He stopped expecting goodness, stopped reaching for joy. He called it bad luck, but in truth, it had a name: unworthiness. He wore it like armor. Years passed. He moved through the world like a ghost, never asking for much, never receiving more than scraps. Then came that winter night. He was walking home through the market square, collar turned up against the cold, eyes fixed on the cracks in the stone. The lights above flickered. Somewhere a violin played softly from a window. A beggar reached out to him. Not for money, not for food, just a hand. The man recoiled, muttered, "I have nothing." But the beggar smiled. "You have breath," he said, "and that is enough to bless the world." The man froze. The beggar's voice wasn't loud. It wasn't wise in the usual way, but it cut through something. He hadn't heard the word bless in years, certainly not directed at him. He turned back. "I don't believe in blessings," he said. The beggar nodded. "It doesn't matter. It believes in you." That night, the man sat on his bed, still clothed, the lights off. He kept hearing it. "It believes in you." And something shifted, not because he had evidence, not because his life changed overnight, but because for the first time, he questioned the curse. The certainty with which he had labeled himself unworthy began to tremble. A miracle had happened, not in his body, not in his bank account, but in his thinking. The Course teaches a miracle is a correction introduced into false thinking, T-1.1.36:1. False thinking is not just error. It is the root of suffering, the belief that you are alone, that you are broken, that you are separate from light. These thoughts are the prison. The miracle does not break down the walls. It shows you they were never real. It invites you to walk through them as if they were missed. That night, the man didn't sleep, but he lay still, and for the first time in a long while, he imagined waking with a heart not burdened by shame. That imagining was the miracle. A single correction, a single opening, and once the spell is questioned, it begins to dissolve. He was never cursed, only convinced, and the miracle was remembering the truth. Every thought you produce, anything you say, any action you do, it bears your signature. Thich Nhat Hanh. He hadn't written anything in months. The poet sat hunched at the cafe table, staring at the worn leather of his notebook. The city outside moved without pause. Cars, lives, arguments, laughter, but inside him, everything was still and gray. He opened the notebook out of habit more than hope. The words came, suddenly, uninvited, clear. You are already free. He didn't know who it was for. It didn't feel like his own voice, more like something that passed through. He closed the book, sipped cold coffee, forgot the line. Later that evening, he left the notebook on a bench. Not intentionally, just a moment of distraction. Or maybe something deeper, nudging him to let it go. Across the city, a woman stood on a rooftop, 15 stories high, wind in her hair, silence in her ears. She wasn't crying. She had moved past the tears. No one had called. No one had noticed the signs. Not really. She didn't want to die, she just wanted the pain to stop. And then, for no reason she could name, she climbed back down. She wandered through the city, number floating. Her feet carried her to a park she hadn't visited in years. She sat on a bench. And there, waiting like a quiet hand on her shoulder, was the notebook. She opened it. There were no names, no poems, just a few scattered words. And in the center of the page, "You are already free." The world did not shift. The sky did not open. But her heart did. Just slightly, enough. She didn't understand it, but something loosened. The grip of despair, the veil of worthlessness. She held the book to her chest and sobbed, not out of pain but release. She would go home, for now, for today, because someone, somewhere, had once thought a loving thought, and she had found it. The Course says, miracles are thoughts. T-1.1.351. Not actions, not spectacles, not outcomes, just thoughts, aligned with love, rooted in truth. They move beyond the moment they are born. They echo in the quiet. They ripple across time and space. You may never see what your kindness does. You may never know who your forgiveness heals. But love never ends at the mind that thinks it. It travels. The poet never knew what became of the notebook. He never saw the rooftop, never met the woman, but his thought was enough. One pure thread woven into the fabric of the world, and somewhere, someone stepped back from the edge. Because of it, every loving thought is a miracle. It needs no audience, only sincerity, only presence, only you. The thunder had already passed, but the child didn't know that. She trembled beneath the bed, hands over her ears, eyes wide in the dark. Lightning had come in fast, flashing white across the windows, rattling the house like a warning. The wind howled, and with it, her certainty unraveled. She believed the storm was still there, because fear doesn't need proof. It only needs memory. Footsteps echoed down the hallway. The child squeezed her eyes shut, waiting. Then, softness. A warm hand brushing back the blanket. A voice, calm and slow, saying her name. Not loud, not urgent, just there. The mother knelt down, folding herself beneath the bed's edge. She didn't pull the child out. She didn't force the light. She waited, and then opened her arms. The child leaned in, first hesitantly, then fully, and was held. That was all. No speech, no explanation. Just breathe. Just stillness. Eventually, they rose. They stood together by the window. The world outside glistened. Raindrops clung to the glass like tiny lanterns. The sky had cleared. The storm had long passed. But the miracle wasn't the weather. The miracle was the realization that it had been safe all along. The Course says, miracles are associated with fear only because of the belief that darkness can hide. T-1.1.3 3:1. Fear convinces us that we are alone, that we are fragile, that something is lurking just beyond the reach of light. But the miracle tells another story. Darkness cannot hide, because darkness isn't a force, it's an absence of light, an absence of truth, and the moment light enters, even a flicker, the illusion is undone. The child had believed in the storm longer than the storm believed in itself. We all do that. We cling to pain that has passed. We rehearse the thunder after it has gone silent. We hide under beds of our own making, even while the sun rises outside. But love waits. It doesn't demand. It doesn't argue. It simply stands at the edge of your hiding place and opens its arms. When you accept the miracle, you do not banish the dark. You remember that it never had power to begin with. The child was not saved from the storm. She was reminded that it had already ended. So has yours. Whatever fear clutches at your ribs, whatever shadow lingers at the edge of your thoughts, it cannot stay where light is welcome. Invite it. Even if your voice trembles, even if you don't believe it yet, say, "I am not alone," and light will answer. She taught quietly, not with confidence, not with flair, but with care. Her name was Maryanne. She taught 6th grade in a small school by the edge of a faded town. The walls were chipped. The clocks ticked unevenly. Her students came and went like shadows, some loud, some distant, some already carrying more than a child should. Maryanne never thought she made much difference. She corrected papers with diligence, smiled when she could. But inside, a voice always whispered, "You're not enough. You're just getting by." And then came Daniel. He was always late, always tired, clothes never quite clean. His eyes held a kind of silence that made her heart ache. She tried her best, offered help, left notes of encouragement. He rarely responded, until one day she found him sitting alone at recess, shoulders curled in like he wanted to disappear. She sat beside him, no lecture, no fuss, just a sentence. "You matter, Daniel, even if it doesn't feel like it. You do." He didn't speak, he didn't look up. But something shifted in the air between them. Years passed. Students came, students went. Maryanne retired with quiet ceremony, a stack of letters and a plaque that said, "Thank you for your years of service." She never told anyone how hollow that sounded. Time moved. Then, one winter morning, she received a letter. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the name at the bottom stopped her breath. Daniel. He was now a teacher. And in the letter he wrote, "I didn't believe anyone saw me, not until you did. You changed everything. I became a teacher because of you. And when I doubt myself, I remember your voice. You matter. I've said it to students who don't believe in themselves. And one day, one of them will say it to someone else." Maryanne read it 3 times before she cried. Not because of the praise, but because she realized she had taught something that lived beyond her. The Course tells us miracles are teaching devices. T-1.1.3, 4:1. They teach what cannot be spoken directly. They teach love by embodying it. They teach unity by extending it. When Maryanne told Daniel he mattered, she wasn't delivering a lecture. She was remembering the truth for him when he couldn't remember it himself. And in doing so, she remembered it for herself too. Each miracle plants a seed. Sometimes you never see the tree. Sometimes you never know the fruit it bears. But the lesson moves forward, outward, inward. And one day, what you gave in a whisper may return in a voice that saves you, because miracles do not belong to the giver. They belong to love, and love always completes its own circuit. You are not separate. You are not forgotten. You are part of a chain of remembering, and someone out there is learning who they are because of something you once dared to say. The cell was 6 feet wide, concrete floor, steel bars, a window too high to see through. Each day folded into the next like the pages of a forgotten book. He had been there for 10 years. His name was Ilas. Time had taken many things, his dignity, his reputation, his hope. But it hadn't taken his hunger, not for food, for meaning. He read whatever they gave him, manuals, dictionaries, sometimes scraps torn from books, too damaged to hold together. One day, a guard handed him a tattered volume, no cover, half the pages missing. He opened it anyway, and on one of the surviving pages, in a worn, slanted script, He read, "You are not this cage." He stared at it. At first, he thought it was metaphor, maybe poetry, maybe some vague encouragement from a forgotten author. But he kept reading it. Every day, not because he believed it, but because it refused to leave him. "You are not this cage." Something in him stirred, not defiance, not escape, just question. If I'm not this cage, then what am I? He sat with it. Days turned into weeks. His body remained locked behind bars, but his mind began to stretch. Like a muscle long unused, he started to see things differently. The guard who mocked him, he saw fear in the man's posture, the silence in the hallway. He heard it not as punishment, but invitation. He began to meditate, to breathe, to remember things from childhood, the smell of bread, the sound of rain on his mother's roof. The cell did not change, but Ilas did. And one day, standing under the single square of light from the window, he whispered to the empty room, "I'm not this cage." Not just the words, the knowing, and something broke. Not the walls, the story that had bound him tighter than any chain, that he was guilty, that he was forgotten, that he was less than human. The Course teaches, miracles represent freedom from fear, T-1.1.37:1, not freedom from bars, not freedom from circumstances, freedom from fear, and fear, like all illusions, only holds power when we believe in it. The miracle is not escape, it is awakening. The realization that your identity cannot be imprisoned, that your worth is not decided by verdicts or past mistakes, that your mind, once aligned with love, cannot be contained by any walls. Ilas was still a prisoner, but he was no longer captive, because the door that matters most is in the mind, and it had opened. Miracles do not promise new surroundings, they promise new vision. And with that vision comes peace, even here, even now, even in a cage made of stone. They told her she would never see him. The doctors were kind but clinical. Her vision had been gone since she was 20. Her optic nerves, they said, had surrendered long ago. She had come to accept the darkness, not as punishment, but as her world. Quiet, dimensions, familiar. And then he came, her son. Born in the soft hours before dawn, swaddled in warmth and wailing like his voice had waited lifetimes to be heard. They placed him in her arms. She did not reach to see him with eyes. She reached with fingers slow and reverent, tracing the curve of his nose, the flutter of lashes, the fullness of his cheek. She felt him breathing. She felt the tiny rise and fall. And then she laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a polite one, but a sound so full and deep it made the nurse cry. "I see him," she said. They stared, confused. But she wasn't joking. She wasn't speaking in metaphor. She had seen something real, not with the eyes that failed her, with something deeper. The Course says, miracles are seen in light. T-1.1.39:1. And light is not limited to vision. Light is awareness. Light is truth. Light is love, unblocked. She saw him not as form, but as essence. She recognized him, not as a new arrival, but as someone deeply known. This is the miracle. To perceive not with the body's instruments, but with the soul's knowing. In light, the veil lifts. In light, you don't invent miracles, you remember them. The mother did not need sight to see her child. She needed presence. And in that presence, all illusion fell away. This world trains us to believe that sight is only what the eyes can prove. But the Course reminds us, what the eyes show is not truth. It is projection. Only in light, only in the purity of love can we see what's truly there. Not separation, not fear, not loss, but unity, wholeness, miracles. So pause now, breathe. Look not with your eyes, but with your heart. What have you been blind to? What love is already present, waiting to be touched? You don't need to earn the miracle. You need only remember the light. And now, if this journey moved something in you, if a spark of light stirred where shadows once lived, let it ripple. If these stories moved something in you, if it reminded you, even for a moment, that you are more than the pain, more than the past, more than the world has told you, then stay close. This is only the beginning. In this series, we will walk together through A Course in Miracles, chapter by chapter, miracle by miracle, not just reading, but remembering, not just learning, but experiencing. Each episode is an invitation to return, to feel, to see again. So if you're ready to journey deeper, subscribe. Turn on the bell so the light finds you. Share this with someone still hiding from their own miracle. And leave a comment. Let me know the moment that touched you. Because this isn't just a series, it's a return. And I promise you, by the end, you won't just understand miracles, you will become one.